So it's 10 o'clock. Let's start with opening prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for giving us another day of life. Thank you for giving us our guardian angels that keep us safe and continue to give us more of the Holy Spirit and the fruits of the Spirit. Help us to understand and remember this lesson so we can be able to teach it and continue to give us more understanding of the message and the methodology so we can be able to come up with truths from the Bible on our own. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. So welcome everybody to Youth Prophecy Group Meeting 28. Today is April 19, 2020, and we are the Fluguses. So, quiz time. And this quiz is about last week's lesson on Daniel 11, verse 40. Next. Question number 1. Who are the players, the two players in Daniel 11, verse 40a in the Millerites version? And you can type the answer in the chat if you want to, but I want to ask this question first to the Coleman. And it doesn't matter which one. Okay. What? Oh, there's something in the chat. B. Oh,
and yeah. B.
2 B's. Anybody else want to answer? One from the Colemans and one from Olivia. Anybody else want to answer? If you said something, Eric, we couldn't understand. What was the question? So, who were the two players in Millwright Daniel 11 verse 48? So we gave the answers of B. Next. The answer was E. Egypt and France. Egypt was the king of the south, and they pushed at France, which is the him. Okay, the second question is who were the players in Daniel 11:40b according to the Millerites? Oh yeah, to who? First this time, David.
Yes. Huh?
Who are the two players in Daniel 11:40b according to the Millerites?
You asking David?
Yes. Anybody else want to answer? No answer. You can type in the chat if you want. Okay, so the answer is A. Turkey and France. Turkey was the king of the north and France is the him. Okay, so now we're gonna go. I'm pretty sure these are a little bit easier. Who are the two players in our version of Daniel 11:40a? To anybody. You can just put it in the chat if you want. Or you can say it. Of course, you can say it. The king. Do you know who the king of the north and the king of the south are in Daniel 11:40a? Okay, the answer. Oh, we have something in the chat.
What was the question?
In Daniel 11:40a, according to us, who are the two players? D.
D.
Any other answers?
What was the question?
In Daniel 11:40a, according to us, who are the two players?
B?
D?
She said B.
B?
Mhm.
Yeah.
D.
Okay.
The answer is D. We got one of those. So it's France and the papacy. France being the king of the south, the papacy being the king of the north. And last question. The two players in Daniel 11:40b, according to us, this movement, who are they? Anybody can answer. You can type in the chat if you want.
B, sorry. I thought you meant the whole of Daniel 40. Okay, yeah, it's B for this.
Okay, we have one B. Anybody else?
B?
Another B. Okay, and the answer is B. Oh, another chat.
Yes,
B,
B.
yes. So correct. The answer is B. The United States and the papacy are the king of the north, and the USSR was the king of the south. So congratulations, everybody, for participating.
So the title of today's lesson is the Kings of the South. The kings of forgot to read the introductory paragraph. Since Putin will be the global leader until 2021, it's important to understand the King of the South and how it behaved in history. This message's understanding of the future was built around the King of the North. But a few years ago, we gained an understanding of the King of the South. The King of the South can be seen throughout history. One of those times we see it is in the kings of Epirus. In this lesson, we will parallel the kings of Epirus, who were the kings of the South, with the rulers of the USSR and Russia, who we know were also the king of the South. And we will also take a look at what the king of the South, which is Russia, is doing today. So the kings of Epirus is what we're going to start off with.
So the first king of Epirus was Admetus. He ruled from around 470 BC to 430 BC. He was from one of the tribes, the Molossians, that lived in the area of Epirus, which is in Greece, and he was their leader. After him, the next king of Epirus was his son, Tharpas, then his son Alcetus I, and then his son Neoptolemus I, who was Alexander the Great's mother's father. After Neoptolemus I was his brother Arabas. Then the sixth king of Epirus was Alexander I, which was Neoptolemus' son.
Just be simple.
Summary: the first king was Admetus, the second Tharpas, the third Alcetus I, the fourth Neoptolemus I, the fifth Arabas, and the sixth Alexander I. And that's Admetus.
In 331 BC, Alcetus became king of Epirus, so he was the seventh king of Epirus. In 317 BC, he helped a Macedonian general named Polyperchon restore Olympias, who was Alexander the Great's mother, and Alexander IV, Alexander the Great's son, to Macedonia. The next year, he marched his army to help Olympias, who was at war with Cassander. However, the Epirus didn't like being in an army, so they rose up against Alcetus. They mutinied, and they kicked him out of the kingdom. He was removed in a coup. The Epirus then placed Neoptolemus II on the throne in 302 BC.
Next was Alcetus again. Neoptolemus was only able to rule for 3 years, and in 313 BC, Alcetus returned to the throne. The Epirus got tired of Neoptolemus, and they made Alcetus king again. Alcetus had been weakened, however, because some Epirus still didn't like him, but he was able to raise an army to fight a battle against Cassander, and that's the Cassander from Daniel 11, in 313 BC. Alcetus was defeated and wounded and died soon after. So Alcetus returned to the throne, and in this picture on the left, that is Alcetus, and he fought a battle with Cassander, who was on the right, but he lost and was basically killed.
Alcetus II. The ninth king of Epirus was Alcetus II. He was the older brother of Alcetus. He had an ungovernable temper, so his father, which was the fifth king, had him banished and appointed Alcetus to be king after him. But when Alcetus died, the people brought Alcetus II back to be king anyway. In his reign, he made an alliance with Cassander, but he only reigned from 313 to 306 BC because the people got tired of him getting angry all the time, and so they killed him.
In 307 BC, Glaucus invaded Epirus and put Pyrrhus on the throne. So Pyrrhus lived with Glaucus for, I think, 11 or 12 years because most of his family was killed. So they took him to Glaucus' kingdom to protect him.
He's Alcetus' son.
Yeah.
Pyrrhus is Alcetus' son.
Pyrrhus was still young, so he was 11 or 12 at the time when he was returned to Epirus. When he was 17 years old, he went to Glaucus' kingdom to attend his son's wedding. While he was away, the Molossians, a tribe that lived in Epirus, rebelled against Pyrrhus, drove out his supporters, and placed Neoptolemus II on the throne. This happened in about 302 BC. After being dethroned in 302 BC, Pyrrhus went and served under his brother-in-law Demetrius the Besieger. In 298 BC, Demetrius and Ptolemy I Soter signed a treaty, and Pyrrhus was sent to Egypt as a hostage. The next year, Ptolemy provided Pyrrhus with an army and money and sent him to Epirus. Not willing to fight a civil war, Pyrrhus and Neoptolemus II went into alliance, ruling as co-rulers. They immediately began plotting against one another, so their co-rulership wouldn't last long.
That was Demetrius and Pyrrhus.
In that picture.
Neoptolemus.
Yes, Neoptolemus and Pyrrhus.
When Pyrrhus had put up enough with Neoptolemus, in 297 BC, Pyrrhus killed him. Pyrrhus then had the throne all to himself for another 25 years. When Pyrrhus died in 272 BC, his son Alexander II took his place as king of Epirus. Alexander II reigned until 255 BC, where he died. Next, the throne was given to his wife being Alexander II's wife, Olympus II, who was regent of Epirus for a short time. Alexander II and Olympus II's son, Pyrrhus II, took over next and ruled from 255 to 237 BC. In 237, Pyrrhus II's brother, Ptolemy, began to rule. He ruled until 234 BC, when his son, Pyrrhus III, took over. Pyrrhus III's reign was short, and that year, Diademia, who was Pyrrhus II's daughter, began to rule. Diademia ruled she ruled till 233 BC, where she was killed. There were no more people left of the royal family, so the Epirotes made the Epirus League, which was a republic because they didn't want to be ruled by a king anymore. So there were 7 last kings, including Pyrrhus, before the Pyrrhus made a league, which was a republic. And that red part on the map is Epirus, and these 7 crowns represent the 7 kings.
Kings and
Kings and queens. So this is the line of what we talked about. It began with Admetus, and he was the first king. Next was Alcetus and Neoptolemus II. Wait, no. Next was Alcetus, and he was removed in a coup and replaced by Neoptolemus II. And when Neoptolemus was removed, they put Alcetus back on the throne, but he had been weakened because people still didn't like him. And then next after Alcetus was Alcetus. Alcetus. It doesn't matter. Alcetus II. And he was the 9th king, but he had an ungovernable temper. So they eventually got rid of him and replaced him with Pyrrhus. And after Pyrrhus, when Pyrrhus he was at a birthday party? Oh, a wedding. He was at a wedding, and while he was gone, Neoptolemus, the same guy from the beginning, took over, and he had to co-rule with Pyrrhus till Pyrrhus killed him and became king again till 272. Yeah, till 272. And then after Pyrrhus, there were 7 kings, including him. So after him will be technically 6 kings before the Epirus League.
Okay, so we're gonna line up the kings of Epirus with the leaders of the USSR and Russia. So the first leader was Stalin. We'll talk about Lenin a little bit later. So the first real leader of the Soviet Union was Stalin. After Lenin got sick in 1922, Stalin increased his power until he was the dictator of the Soviet Union. He ruled from around 1929 to his death in 1953. He was a leader of the USSR during World War II. Stalin is paralleled by Admetus, who was the first king of Epirus. Both Stalin and Admetus were the first king of the South in the context of the Soviet Union and Epirus. Many more people ruled after Stalin that we're not going to name, unlike we did with Epirus. And it's the same amount of people. And they all parallel the kings of Epirus that happened after Admetus. So Stalin parallels Admetus. They're the first king of the South.
Mikhail Sergeyevich Gorbachev became president of the Soviet Union on March 5th, 1990, but he was ruling before that. He wasn't just the president. He supported reforms toward globalism, and this angered Soviet nationalists. On August 18th, 1991, they began a coup to remove him. At this time, he was sick, so they thought it would be easy. The coup, however, only lasted until August 21st, when the coup organizers realized it wasn't going to be easy because most people supported Gorbachev. Although Gorbachev was not removed from power, he was severely weakened. During the August coup that was intended to remove him from power, Yanayev was made acting president of the Soviet Union. His presidency lasted from August 19th to 21st, which was the time of the coup. On August 21st, he was arrested for his involvement in the coup, but was later released. The incident parallels the history of Alcetus and Neoptolemus II.
Who's that in the picture?
So on the right is Gorbachev, and on the left is Yanayev.
Next is Gorbachev again, and like you said last time, this is the same Gorbachev that was in the picture. Even though Gorbachev survived the coup, he was still weakened. When Gorbachev got back to office, he still faced problems. The USSR was falling apart. Gorbachev tried to unify the country, but he had increasing opposition to his Union Treaty. On December 8, 1999, Yeltsin Yeltsin met with the presidents of Ukraine and Belarus and declared that the Soviet Union had ceased to exist and it had been replaced with the Commonwealth of Independent States, for short CIS. All of this was done without Gorbachev knowing, and it just added to the problems. On December 25, 1991, Gorbachev resigned, and the next day the USSR officially collapsed. We know that the USSR was the king of the South, so this collapsing of the USSR parallels the weakening and death of Alcetus, who was also the king of the South. So in this picture, this is a picture of Gorbachev on when he did his speech that he was resigning. This is actually like a picture of the TV, I think. Maybe. But he resigned because he had been weakened and the Soviet Union was collapsing.
Yeltsin. The first president of Russia was Boris Yeltsin. He was elected on June 12, 1991, with 57% of the popular vote. Gorbachev had wanted someone else to be president, but they only got 16%. Yeltsin took office on July 10th. Gorbachev resigned as leader of the Soviet Union on December 25th, and this is all in 1991, because he had lost all of his power to Yeltsin. Yeltsin was very popular at the beginning of his presidency. He worked to destroy socialism and implement a democracy. He also tried to change the Russian economy from communist to capitalist. But the economy worsened and millions of people became poor. He became unpopular. He also had health issues and was often drunk. Yeltsin is paralleled by Alcetus II, who was king of Epirus, because they both had health problems and physically they weren't very stable. On December 31st, 1999, he resigned to the delight of the people. And that's Yeltsin.
Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin became president on May 7, 2000. He was acting president since December 31st, 1999, when Boris Yeltsin resigned. Once he officially became the president of Russia, he went to work silencing his opponents. He signed a deal with the Russian oligarchs, which were Russian billionaires who controlled most of Russia, so they could keep their wealth as long as they aligned themselves with him and his government. Those who opposed his government, he imprisoned. As for the ordinary people, if they spoke against him, he had them killed. Putin parallels Pyrrhus. Both were the 10th kings, one in Russia and the other in Epirus. Question from Eric. Did Gorbachev want the world multilateral working together?
Yes. That was his New World Order.
Yeah. And that's Putin in the picture.
Mhm.
According to the Russian constitution, Vladimir Putin couldn't run for a third consecutive term. On May 8, 2008, Dmitry Medvedev became president, but Putin hadn't lost his grip on power. Medvedev was a friend of Putin's, and once in office, he made Putin the prime minister of Russia. Although Medvedev was the president, he only had equal, if not less, power than Putin. This was a co-rulership between him and Putin. In 2012, this co-rule ended. This history in Russia, while Medvedev and Putin were co-ruling, points back to the history when Epirus and Neoptolemus II co-ruled. So on the right is Putin, and on the left is Medvedev, and in the back, I don't know what that is.
After the co-rulership, in 2012, Putin became president again. This parallels the return of Pyrrhus to the throne after he killed Neoptolemus, and we know Neoptolemus was co-ruling with him. We can line up the last kings of Epirus, who were the kings of the south, and the Epirot League with our time. If we count the last kings of Epirus after Pyrrhus, we get 6 kings. If we include Pyrrhus, we get 7. The 7th kingdom of Bible prophecy, which is Trump as the head of the United Nations, will begin at the Sunday Law, and that is where Russia, the king of the south, under Putin, will die. This means we can line up This means we can line up the 7 kings of Epirus with Russia, who will be in the 7th kingdom, or who will die at the beginning of the 7th kingdom. After the 7 kings, the Epirot League is formed. We can line this up with the United Nations, where Putin will lose all his power in land and it will be given to the League, or Trump as the head of the United Nations. So this is Putin, a picture of Putin at the United Nations. So this is the line. It began, well, not technically, Lenin created the USSR, but Stalin was the first official leader of the Soviet Union. Next, there were 5 leaders till Gorbachev became the leader, who was the 7th leader. He was removed in a coup and replaced with Yanayev, who was the 8th leader, but eventually, Yanayev only reigned for a few days, right? He was only ruling for a few days, and Gorbachev came back, but he had been weakened, so he resigned. Yeltsin became the leader next. He was the 9th leader, but he had health issues and he was always drunk, so people didn't like him. And eventually he appointed Putin to be the leader. He was the 10th. And when Putin had done his 2 terms, you can't do a 3rd term in a row, so he had to co-rule with Medvedev, and they co-ruled till Medvedev's presidential term was over. Then Putin came back, and he marks the beginning of the 7th kingdom, which will be at the Sunday Law. At the Sunday Law, he marks the beginning of the 7th kingdom, and that's where his land will be given to the United Nations, which parallels the Epirot League. Epirot League.
So, the change of the king of the south. This is another way of looking at Putin. So, Tsar Nicholas. The last Tsar of Russia was Tsar Nicholas II. He began to reign around 1895 after his father died. But he was not well trained to be Tsar. He didn't even want to be the Tsar. The people of Russia became unhappy with his leadership. And there was a revolution in 1905 when people protested and soldiers mutinied to try to get a more democratic government. Tsar Nicholas barely budged, and the revolution was only a little successful. But in World War I, the Tsar wasn't a good leader either. So in 1917, the Russian Revolution began. He abdicated the throne on March 15, 1917, and on November 9th, a new government began to be formed, the Soviet Union. Tsar Nicholas II's abdication was the end of the Russian Empire. After him, Russia was totally different. He is paralleled by Gorbachev, because when Gorbachev resigned, the Soviet Union ended, and the king of the south of Russia was totally different after that.
In May 1992, Vladimir Lenin suffered from his first stroke. He temporarily lost his ability to speak and was paralyzed on his right side. In December of the same year, he had another stroke. In March 1923, he suffered from yet another stroke and lost his ability to speak. He died on January 21st, 1924, after he fell into a coma. Joseph Stalin took his place. Lenin founded the Soviet Union, and Stalin was the first leader after him. Stalin's on the right and Lenin is on the left. So Tsar Nicholas was the last leader of the Russian Empire, and he abdicated. Gorbachev was the last leader of the Soviet Union, and he resigned or abdicated. Lenin was the founder of the Soviet Union, but he had health problems. Yeltsin was the last leader of the Soviet,
First president of Russia,
and he had health problems. Stalin was the first leader after Lenin, and Putin was the first leader after Yeltsin.
Putin's terms. We know that Putin is a dictator, but he didn't become a dictator overnight. It's what he did previous to now that set his dictatorship in place. In 1999, the Russian President Yeltsin Boris Yeltsin, resigned and appointed Putin to be the president. The next year, in 2012, Putin ran for president and won. The first step to being a dictator is to purge or get rid of all your opponents. In his first presidential term, Putin took over the Russian oligarchs, the Russian media, and the Russian mafia. This was the first step to becoming a dictator. When Putin's term was over in 2004, he ran again for president and won. In his second term, Putin decided that he wanted to control the Russian oil. He made a large oil company that was against him, Yukos, sell its main asset to Rosneft, who was an oil company favoring him. Putin also used a terrorist attack in Chechnya to gain control of that area, becoming more of a dictator. But soon Putin faced a problem. In Russia, you can only be president for 2 terms at a time, and that means that in 2008, Putin will be out of power. So, in this picture, the top left picture is of Yeltsin and Putin, because we know Yeltsin appointed Putin after him. The next picture, the one on the right, the long one, the biggest one, is of Putin when he was elected the first time, and the bottom left picture is of Putin when he was elected the second time.
Putin from 2008 to 2018. According to the Russian constitution, someone can only be president for at the most 2 terms in a row. So after Putin had finished his 2 terms, like we just saw in 2008, he had to step down. But he is a dictator and he wants to always have power, so he didn't really step down. Instead, he co-ruled with Medvedev, which is the top left, Putin and Medvedev. He was Medvedev's prime minister for the 1 term. Medvedev served from 2008 to 2012. Then he announced that he would run again, and people protested. But he was re-elected in 2012 as president anyway. The presidential term during Medvedev had been changed from 4 years to 6 years. So when Putin began his presidency in 2012, he had 6 years from 2012 to 2018. So he just gave himself more time. In 2016, Trump got elected with the help of Putin, and Putin's term, as you said, ended in 2018. His 3rd term ended in 2018. And that's Putin.
In his election.
Yeah. I don't remember which one.
The one after the co-rulership.
2012.
Mm-hmm.
Vladimir Putin was elected to his 4th term on May 7, 2018. This term will last until 2024. This will be his 2nd consecutive term, which means he can't run again in 2024, so he's already preparing for that. In 2020, this year, he began suggesting major changes to the Russian constitution, such as limiting the next Russian president to a maximum of 2 terms, requiring anyone who runs to have lived in Russia for at least a quarter of a century, and not allowing the president to pick the prime minister. What he is suggesting is taking power away from the office of president, so no president after him can wield as much power as he did. He is in favor of the suggestion of resetting the term so he could run for president again in 2024. It has also been suggested to remove term limits altogether, and since all of Putin's friends are in power, there is no way he could lose. Of course, he is in favor of that for himself, but he said the 2-term limit max should be applied to future presidents. He also plans on making an amendment to the Constitution that mentions God and takes away the rights of homosexual people. This is showing just how conservative he is. If Putin can remain in power or remain president for the rest of his life, which is what he wants, he'll just make sure no one after him ever gets as powerful as he did, and he'll always have a say-so in Russian politics.
Question: was Putin in power for 18 years?
He's been in power since 1999, so
let's see.
In presidential elections, he's been 16 years in his 16 years till now in his being the president. But if you count Medvedev, that's 20, and he's still going.
Right.
So yeah,
Right.
he's been president for more than 18. He's
My-
been in
been in
power
power.
for more than 18
My
years.
calculations say he's been in power for 21 years.
I didn't count Medvedev.
Oh, well, he was basically in power in Medvedev. He had probably like more power than Medvedev. So around 18 years.
So this is the line of Putin's terms. He was appointed by Yeltsin in 1999 as acting president until the elections. He was elected in 2000 and his first term lasted until 2004. His second term began in 2004 and lasted until 2008. In 2008, he couldn't run again because of the Russian constitution, but he co-ruled with Medvedev until 2012. And then after that, the term limits were changed. Well, in Medvedev,
2008.
it was in 2008.
Mhm.
In 2008, the term limits were changed to 6 years. So in 2012, he began his first 6-year term to 2018. And then in 2018, he was elected again for his fourth term until 2024. Well, that's when his term is supposed to end. And that is
So does anybody?
summary. Summary. So in summary, the first king of Epirus was Admetus, and that lines up with the first leader of the USSR, which was Stalin. Then there were 5 kings and 5 leaders after them. The 7th king of Epirus was Alcetus, and he was removed in a coup. And the 7th leader of the Soviet Union was Gorbachev, and he was removed in a coup. The king after Alcetus was Neoptolemus II. He was the 8th king, and after Gorbachev was Yanayev, who was the 8th leader. Then Alcetus returned to the throne, but he was weakened. Gorbachev returned to being president, but he was weakened. After Alcetus was Alcetus II. He was the 9th king, and he had an ungovernable temper. After Gorbachev was Yeltsin, and he had an ungovernable temper and health problems. After Alcetus II was Pyrrhus, who was the 10th king, and after Yeltsin was Putin, who was the 10th leader. But Pyrrhus left the kingdom, and so he ended up having to co-rule with Neoptolemus II, and Putin couldn't run a 3rd consecutive term, so he had to co-rule with Medvedev. Then after the co-rulership, Pyrrhus was king by himself, and after the co-rule with Medvedev, Putin was president by himself. And then after that, it's the 7th kingdom, and you have 7 kings, and then the United Nations or the Epirus League. Then you have Tsar Nicholas, the last leader of the Russian Empire, and he abdicated. Gorbachev, the last leader of the Soviet Union, he resigned. Lenin, he was the founder of the Soviet Union, and he had health problems. Yeltsin was the founder of Russia, and he had health problems. Stalin was the first leader after Lenin, and Putin was the first leader after Yeltsin.
And one thing we didn't mention, Lenin appointed Stalin to his position, and Yeltsin appointed Putin to his position. The positions they kept for the rest of Stalin's life.
And the rest of Putin's life.
Well,
And lastly, the terms. Putin was appointed president in 1999 by Yeltsin. His first term was from 2000 to 2004. His second term was from 2004 to 2008. He co-ruled from 2008 to 2012. His third term was from 2012 to 2018. And his fourth term was from 2008, supposed to end in 2024.
2018.
2018.
But we know Putin is planning to stay in power after 2024.
Yeah, somewhere said until like 2036.
don't think the Lord will be here that long. Anyway. So, anybody have any questions or comments on the lesson? You type it.
Did you guys just use test, or did you use like NEAT Jones for the source in this? For the Pyrrhus history?
We actually didn't use either, really.
I
We
mean,
really
I
just
mean,
looked
it
all.
came
test.
from
Yeah, it
test,
came from
but
test, but we
did
looked it
research.
all up, except for the part. Well, we did look that up. So yeah, it came from test, but we looked it up.
No, we didn't use AT Jones.
Wait,
for
do
this.
we even have used it? Oh, for Pyrrhus maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Mm-mm.
think.
Not for this specific lesson.
Okay.
Mhm. Oh, so does anybody? Yes.
So was Pyrrhus? So not Pyrrhus. Putin was president longer than anybody else. Was he?
President of Russia, but like the leaders of the dictators of the Soviet Union, probably not. They probably were longer.
How long was Stalin president?
I don't know.
Like 30? No, I don't know.
Yeah. But compared to the other presidents before Putin, yes.
Which was just Yeltsin and Medvedev. But yeah, much longer than them.
Mhm.
1929 to 1953.
25 years.
Which 29?
25 years Stalin was
President.
dictator. If you count 1929, it's not a very hard date for when Stalin became the total dictator of the Soviet Union, because he was rising in power since 1922. But if you count 1929, it'd be 25 years. So
Putin is 21 years,
Putin wants
including
to have
Medvedev.
rule for 25 years, but
Yeah.
I don't know. The world might be over
Wait,
before then.
2025 plus 2020, so that's 26. So if Putin stays in power to 2025, at least he will be more than Stalin. So does anybody have any questions about the message in general, or any comments they have, or anything they want to share about the message that they learned?
So thank you everybody for coming. If you want notes, updates, or recordings, if you have questions, you can email us at youthprophecygroup@gmail.com.
And if you have suggestions on what lessons you want us to do.
So let's have closing prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you for being with us this week. Thank you for protecting us. Thank you for providing for all of our needs. Thank you for giving us the ability to understand your message and to be able to grasp it so that we can teach others and that we can share with others. Thank you for calling us to be priests and for calling us to be part of the 144,000. Please help us to prepare for that, for the jobs of teaching, and to prepare for the tests that are coming so that we can be faithful. Please be with us today. Please help us to glorify you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for coming.
Thank you
Thank you
for
for
coming.
coming.
Bye.
Thank you, guys.